Part 1. The unexpected test. The cold wind howled through the nearly empty parking lot as he pulled his coat tighter around himself. The night shift had just ended, and he was exhausted, his body aching from another long day of work. But as he stepped toward his old, rusting car, he noticed something unusual: an elderly janitor struggling with a large trash bin near the building's exit. Something about the scene didn't sit right. The janitor, a frail-looking man in his late 60s, seemed overwhelmed by the weight of the bin. He strained, trying to lift it over the curb, but it barely budged. Several employees passed by, laughing, chatting, completely ignoring the man's struggle. No one even glanced his way. The employee hesitated. He had his own problems to deal with, bills piling up, a family to feed, and a supervisor who seemed to have it out for him. The last thing he needed was to get involved in someone else's trouble. Besides, wasn't this the janitor's job? But then the old man let out a quiet grunt of pain, his thin hands shaking as he attempted to pull the heavy bin again. Something inside the employee stirred. With a sigh, he stepped forward. "Here, let me help you." The janitor looked up, surprise flashing in his tired eyes. "Oh, thank you, son," he murmured, stepping back as the employee grabbed the bin and heaved it over the curb with ease. "No problem," he said, wiping his hands on his pants. "You okay?" The old man nodded. "Just these old bones. They don't work like they used to." He gave a small chuckle, but there was something in his expression, something unreadable. The employee nodded and turned to leave, but before he could take another step, a voice echoed through the lot. "You." He froze. A man stood a few feet away, dressed in an expensive black coat, his hands tucked into his pockets. His piercing gaze was locked onto the employee, studying him as though he had just witnessed something incredible. The employee swallowed hard. Something about the man's presence was unsettling. He wasn't just another worker or manager, his aura carried authority. Power. "You're the only one who stopped to help," the man said, his tone unreadable. "Do you know who I am?" The employee shook his head, his heart pounding. A slow smile spread across the man's face. "Good. We'll talk soon." Then, without another word, he turned and disappeared into the night. The employee stood frozen in place, confused, unnerved. What had just happened? Who was that man? And why did it feel like this was only the beginning of something much bigger? Part 2. The CEO's hidden agenda. The cold air still clung to him as he sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel. His mind raced, replaying the strange encounter in the parking lot. Who was that man? Why had he been watching? And why did his words, "we'll talk soon," feel like a warning? Shaking off the uneasy feeling, he drove home. The bills waiting on the kitchen table reminded him of his real problems. Rent was due. The fridge was half empty. His job barely paid enough to keep things afloat. He didn't have time to worry about mysteries. But the next morning, something even stranger happened. As soon as he walked into the office, he felt it: the air was different. People whispered in hushed tones, glancing toward the executive floor, where only top management had access. He caught bits and pieces of conversations. "Did you hear? He's here. They say he's watching everyone. I heard someone's getting fired today." A chill ran down his spine. He sat at his desk, forcing himself to focus, but then, his computer dinged. New email, urgent, mandatory meeting ***. The subject alone made his stomach tighten. Clicking it open, he read, "Report to conference room 3A immediately. Do not be late." His pulse quickened. He wasn't alone, his coworkers looked just as nervous, some whispering, others pretending to ignore the email. No explanation. No details. Just orders. Minutes later, he stepped into the conference room, finding a handful of employees already there. Everyone looked confused, shifting in their seats, whispering among themselves. The tension was suffocating. Then, the door opened, and he walked in. The man from the parking lot. But this time, there was no black coat. No distant figure in the night. Instead, he was dressed in a sharp, tailored suit, his presence commanding the entire room without a word. His piercing gaze swept over them, studying each face. Then, he spoke. "You're all here because you were chosen," he said, his voice calm but firm. "This company is built on trust, loyalty, and integrity. But not everyone upholds those values." The room was silent. No one dared to breathe. "I have been watching," he continued, stepping forward. "And what I have seen." His eyes locked onto each of them, pausing for just a second longer on the employee. "Has been very revealing." The employee's heart pounded. What had he seen? The man folded his hands behind his back. "Today, we separate the loyal from the disloyal. Some of you will leave this room with an opportunity of a lifetime. Others." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "Will not walk out the same way you walked in." A shiver ran through the room. The employee felt a sinking feeling in his gut. What exactly was happening here? And why did he have the overwhelming sense that this was no ordinary meeting? Silence gripped the room. The man at the front, the CEO, though no one had dared to say it out loud yet, let his words settle in the air. The weight of his presence alone was enough to make grown men shift uncomfortably in their chairs. The employee felt his heartbeat thudding in his ears. He wasn't the only one. The others around the table looked just as nervous, their eyes darting between one another, unsure of what was about to happen. Then, the CEO spoke again. "You may not know this, but for the last several months, I have conducted an experiment. A test." Murmurs broke out, but a single glance from him silenced the room. "I have observed. I have listened. I have given opportunities, small, seemingly insignificant moments that could reveal the truth about who you are." He paused, locking eyes with each person. "Some of you passed. Some of you failed. And today, you will know where you stand." The employee swallowed hard. Was this about last night? The janitor? The moment he had helped without thinking? Or was this about something else? A folder was placed on the table in front of each person. The CEO gestured toward them. "Inside these folders are real scenarios. Some of these things have already happened. Some are about to happen. Your responses will determine your future here." The employee hesitated, then flipped his folder open. His stomach clenched. Inside was a document detailing a scenario, one eerily similar to what had happened with the janitor. Only this time, it was different. Scenario: you witness a coworker struggling with a critical task but helping them may cause you to miss your own deadline, putting your own job at risk. What do you do? Below the question were three choices: ignore them. It's not your responsibility. Help, but only if someone is watching. Assist them, even if it means facing consequences. The employee's palms grew sweaty. His gut told him the answer. But was this a trick? He glanced around. Others were reading their own documents, their expressions ranging from deep thought to outright fear. "Answer honestly," the CEO said, as if reading their minds. "I already know your nature. I am giving you a chance to prove yourself." The employee's mind raced. There had to be a catch. Would they actually penalize someone for making a wrong choice? He looked down at the paper again. If this was truly about loyalty and integrity, then the real question wasn't what he thought the CEO wanted to hear. It was about who he really was. With a deep breath, he circled his answer. But the moment he put the pen down, a voice from across the table broke the silence. "This is ridiculous." A man, one of the senior employees, shoved his folder away. His voice dripped with arrogance. "This isn't how a company should be run. Testing us like we're schoolchildren?" The CEO didn't flinch. "Is that your answer?" The man scoffed. "Damn right it is." The CEO gave a small nod, then gestured toward the door. 2 security guards stepped in. "Then your decision is final," the CEO said. "Please leave." The room froze. The man's face went pale. "Wait, what? You can't be serious." The CEO merely looked at him. No anger. No emotion. Just a simple, quiet authority that said everything without saying anything at all. The security guards moved in. The man panicked. "No, wait. I take it back. I was just saying," but it was too late. The door shut behind him, and the room fell into an unbearable silence. The employee clenched his fists. His choice was already made, but now he knew the truth. This was more than a test. This was a war of character. And the real battle had just begun. The silence in the room felt heavier than ever. The CEO's expression remained unreadable as he slowly turned his gaze toward the remaining employees. "Every choice has consequences," he said. "Some immediate. Some delayed. But they always come." The employee felt his pulse quicken. His answer was locked in, unchangeable now. He had chosen to help, even if it cost him. But had he made the right call? Before he could dwell on it, the CEO's assistant stepped forward with a stack of new papers. "This next phase will determine how well you handle pressure," she announced, handing each person a new folder. The employee took his, heart pounding. He flipped it open. This time, the scenario wasn't hypothetical. It was real. Inside the folder was confidential company data. Highly sensitive information about salaries, promotions, and secret dealings. Things that employees were never meant to see. At the top of the page, bold letters posed the question, "What will you do with this information?" His stomach tightened. There were no multiple-choice answers this time. No easy way out. His mind raced. Was this another trick? A test of integrity? Before he could react, a voice from the far end of the table broke the silence. "Well, this just got interesting." The employee glanced up. One of the men, someone higher up in the company, smirked as he scanned the document. His fingers tapped against the table, his eyes flickering with something that made the employee uneasy. "This information is useful," the man continued, barely hiding his greed. "I could do a lot with this." The CEO remained silent, watching. The man leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Imagine what people would pay to know who's getting promotions next quarter. Or how much our competitors would love to see our internal numbers." The employee's blood ran cold. Was this guy serious? Another employee, a woman sitting near the front, spoke up hesitantly. "This is private company data. We shouldn't even be looking at it." The man scoffed. "You really think the company plays fair with us? They hide things from us all the time. Maybe it's time we even the score." A few people nodded uncomfortably. Others shifted in their seats, pretending not to hear. The employee clenched his jaw. This wasn't just about loyalty. This was about principles. And then, before he could say a word, the CEO snapped his fingers. 2 security guards immediately stepped forward. The greedy employee went rigid. "Wait. What's going on?" The CEO's voice was cold and sharp. "You just failed." Panic flooded the man's face. "I was just talking." "I didn't actually, you revealed your nature," the CEO interrupted. "And in this company, your nature matters more than your skills. The guards grabbed his chair, and suddenly, he was dragged away. Gone. The room remained dead silent. The employee swallowed hard, feeling the weight of what had just happened. The CEO folded his hands behind his back and took a slow step forward. Some of you passed this test before it even began. You chose loyalty before knowing you were being watched. His gaze flicked toward the employee, just for a second. Then he turned back to the room. And some of you are still deciding where you stand. The employee's hands curled into fists. This wasn't just a test. This was a battlefield. And he wasn't sure if he'd make it to the other side. The silence in the conference room stretched, suffocating and heavy. No one dared to speak after the last man had been escorted out. The weight of the CEO's words still lingered. Some of you passed before knowing you were being watched. The employee's mind raced. Watched? Before he could process it, the CEO stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking against the floor. You are all here because I needed to know the truth. Not the version of yourselves you show in performance reviews. Not what you say in meetings. But who you are when no one is watching. A shiver ran through the employee. Had he been watched all along? The CEO gestured toward the walls, and suddenly, the lights dimmed. A massive screen lowered at the front of the room. The employee's stomach twisted. A video began playing. The footage was grainy, taken from hidden security cameras. And then, there he was. Himself. On screen. The employee froze. It was the moment from last night, the janitor struggling with the heavy trash bin. He watched himself hesitate, glance around, then step forward to help. His heart pounded. This had been part of the test. The camera angle shifted. It showed other employees walking by. Ignoring the janitor. Pretending not to see. The CEO let the footage play for a few more seconds before pausing it. His eyes swept across the room. Some of you had the chance to do the right thing, and you chose not to, he said. His voice was eerily calm. And some of you proved yourselves without even realizing it. A wave of unease rippled through the room. The employees who had walked past the janitor sat stiffly in their chairs, their faces pale. The employee clenched his fists. He hadn't done it to be seen. He had just helped. The CEO let the silence settle before speaking again. I don't need employees who look good on paper. I need employees I can trust. People who do the right thing when no one is looking. His words sent a chill down the employee's spine. This wasn't just about the company. This was about who they were as people. And then, the CEO pressed another button. More footage began playing. But this time, it was from inside the office. Conversations. Interactions. The greedy employee, the one who had tried to justify leaking company secrets, was shown whispering with others in the break room. We're just numbers to them, he said. If they ever try to fire me, I've got leverage. I know things they wouldn't want getting out. Gasps filled the room. The CEO tilted his head. This is what I mean when I say that some of you have already failed. The room felt smaller. He turned to his assistant. Their employment contracts. Terminate them. Immediately. The employees in the footage turned pale. Sir, wait, one of them started. But the CEO cut him off with a glance. I gave you chances. I watched. And you showed me who you are. The doors opened. Security stepped in. And just like that, more people were gone. The employee's pulse pounded in his ears. This wasn't just about keeping a job. This was about survival. The CEO turned back to those who remained. Congratulations, he said simply. You've made it further than most. Then he gave them a knowing look. But the real test isn't over yet. The employee's stomach dropped. What could possibly come next? The air in the room was thick with tension. Some employees sat frozen in shock, others visibly trembling as the weight of the CEO's words settled over them. The hidden surveillance, the silent test, everything had been leading up to this moment. The employee felt his pulse hammering in his ears. He had survived so far, but the CEO's last words echoed in his mind, "The real test isn't over yet." The CEO's piercing gaze swept across the room, his presence commanding absolute silence. Then, he slowly stepped forward, rolling up the sleeves of his tailored shirt. "For years, I built this company from the ground up," he began. "I've hired thousands of employees, invested millions, and trusted people who swore loyalty to me. And yet..." He let out a slow breath. "Time and time again, I've been betrayed." The employee's stomach tightened. Betrayed? The CEO nodded toward his assistant, who pulled out another folder, thicker than the rest. She placed it on the table and slid it toward him. Without breaking eye contact with the employees, the CEO flipped it open. Inside were dozens of resignation letters, fraud reports, and confidential emails. "I have been watching everything," the CEO continued. "Not just through security cameras. Not just through small tests. But through people you never even suspected." The employee felt his breath hitch. Spies? Inside the company? The CEO lifted a few of the letters. "These are employees who left, thinking they could steal from me. Some thought they could cheat the system. Some thought they could fake loyalty. Every single one of them was wrong." He dropped the papers back onto the table with a soft thud. "Because loyalty isn't something you can fake." A shiver ran through the employee. The CEO folded his hands behind his back. "Now, it's time for the final decision." The tension in the room spiked. He nodded to his assistant again. She pressed a button on a remote, and suddenly, a new screen lit up. The employee's eyes widened. It was a live feed. Not from security cameras. Not pre-recorded footage. It was happening right now, inside the office. The video showed one of the managers, the same man who had walked past the struggling janitor, sneaking into a restricted office. The room stiffened. The CEO exhaled slowly. "This is what I mean when I say that some of you have already failed." On screen, the man hurriedly stuffed confidential documents into his briefcase, his head darting around to make sure no one was watching. Except, someone was. The CEO turned to the group. "Right now, this man believes he is about to sell company secrets. He believes he's smarter than me." The employee swallowed hard. One of the remaining employees, a woman sitting near the front, hesitated. "What? What are you going to do?" The CEO's lips curled into a faint, unreadable smile. "Watch." On screen, just as the man turned toward the door, 2 security guards burst in. His expression flipped from greed to sheer panic. A struggle. Shouts. Papers flying. Within seconds, the man was dragged out. The video cut off. And the CEO turned back to the stunned employees. "There are always traitors," he said simply. "But there are also those who prove their loyalty, no matter the cost." The employee exhaled slowly. It was clear now. This wasn't just about promotions. It wasn't just about money. This was about survival. The CEO looked at the remaining group, the ones who had made it this far. "You have one final choice," he said. "Stay and prove your worth, or walk away now." A heavy silence followed. No one moved. The employee clenched his fists. He wasn't leaving. Not now. The CEO smirked, as if he already knew their decision. "Then prepare yourselves," he said, his voice cold yet strangely approving. "Because this test It's only the beginning. The tension in the conference room was almost unbearable. The CEO's words hung in the air like an unspoken challenge: stay and prove your worth, or walk away now. No one moved. No one even breathed too loudly. The employee sat still, his pulse racing. He had made it this far, surviving every test, every silent judgment. But something told him the hardest part was still ahead. The CEO nodded, satisfied. Good. Then, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black envelope. He placed it on the table, tapping it once. This envelope contains a name. The employee's stomach tightened. A name of someone in this room, the CEO continued, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable weight. One of you is about to be rewarded beyond your wildest dreams. A ripple of nervous energy passed through the group. Some exchanged glances. Others tried to remain expressionless. The CEO smirked, picking up the envelope and slowly tearing it open. Then, he pulled out a single golden card. The employee's breath caught in his throat. This card represents everything this company stands for, the CEO said, holding it up between his fingers. Loyalty. Integrity. Strength of character. His eyes swept across the room, scanning each face carefully. Then, he called out a name. The employee's heart stopped. It was his. For a second, he thought he had imagined it. But no, everyone was staring at him now. Some with shock. Others with barely hidden envy. The CEO walked forward, placing the golden card in front of him. You passed every test, he said. Even the ones you didn't know you were taking. The employee's hands shook slightly as he picked up the card. It felt heavier than it should have been. You proved yourself without needing to be seen, the CEO continued. You acted with integrity when it mattered most. A strange mix of emotions swirled inside him: relief, disbelief, pride. But before he could even process it fully, the CEO turned to the rest of the group. And for the rest of you, the test is over. The employee frowned, glancing around. Some of the remaining employees looked nervous. The CEO's assistant stepped forward with a clipboard, handing out 2 different envelopes this time. One was white. The other was black. If you receive a white envelope, the CEO explained, congratulations. You remain with the company, but not in the same way you arrived. You will be watched more closely than ever. The employee swallowed hard. And if you receive a black envelope, the CEO continued, his voice dropping just slightly, you are done here. Murmurs spread through the room. The assistant began distributing envelopes. One by one. The reactions were immediate. Some people sighed in relief when they saw white. Others froze in horror when they saw black. The employee watched as a few people, some of whom had been confident just minutes ago, stood up and left, their faces drained of color. They had failed. And now, it was over for them. The CEO turned back to the few who remained. You've all learned something today, he said. Loyalty isn't about saying the right words in a meeting. It's about what you do when no one is watching. His gaze landed on the employee for a brief second before he smirked. Enjoy your reward, he said simply. Because the next challenge will be even harder. The employee gripped the golden card in his hands, knowing deep down that this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. The golden card felt heavy in the employee's hand. His heart still pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. He had passed. But something about the CEO's last words haunted him: the next challenge will be even harder. The CEO walked toward the massive window overlooking the city skyline. He clasped his hands behind his back, his reflection staring back at him in the glass. Most people think success is about talent, he said, his voice steady. Or intelligence. Or even hard work. He turned back, his sharp gaze locking onto the remaining employees. They're wrong. The room was silent. Success is about trust. The employee swallowed hard. You may have passed today's test, the CEO continued. But the real question is, how will you handle power? The employee stiffened. Power? The CEO nodded toward his assistant. She stepped forward and placed another stack of folders on the table. Each of you will receive a new assignment, the CEO said. One that will determine if you are truly ready to lead. The employee flipped open his folder. Inside was a detailed report on a high-level executive. Not just any executive, his own department manager. His breath hitched as he read the words at the top of the page, "Your loyalty test is not over. You must uncover the truth." His eyes scanned the document. It contained financial records, emails, and reports, evidence of corruption. The CEO leaned forward slightly, his expression unreadable. I have reason to believe that someone at the highest levels of this company is betraying me. The air in the room felt thick. And now, it's your job to find out who. The employee's throat went dry. This wasn't just about proving loyalty anymore. This was about exposing the truth. But the real question was, would he be able to handle what he found? The employee stared at the folder in front of him, his fingers tightening around the edges. The room was silent, except for the CEO's steady breathing as he watched the remaining employees process their final task. Uncover the truth. The words echoed in his mind, sending a chill down his spine. This wasn't about theoretical choices anymore. This wasn't a test with a hypothetical answer. This was real. He flipped through the pages, scanning emails, transaction logs, and meeting transcripts. There were signs, subtle but damning. Someone high up in the company was manipulating deals, siphoning funds, and betraying the very organization they claimed to serve. And the worst part? The name on the final page was his own department manager. His stomach dropped. For years, he had looked up to this person. Trusted them. Respected them. And now? The evidence suggested they had been playing a dangerous game behind the CEO's back. He clenched his jaw. This was a trap. Not just for the manager. For him. What would happen if he exposed them? Would the CEO protect him? Or would he become just another casualty in this ruthless game? The CEO finally spoke, his voice as calm as ever. You have a choice, he said. Say nothing, and you can continue working under your manager, pretending this never happened. Or, you can do what's right, no matter the cost. The air in the room thickened. The employee felt the weight of his decision pressing down on him. He thought of everything, the small tests, the silent observations, the moments where integrity had mattered more than anything else. And then, he made his choice. Slowly, he slid the folder back across the table, looking the CEO straight in the eye. This company stands for loyalty, right? He said. The CEO nodded once. Then I can't stay silent. For a long moment, no one spoke. The CEO studied him, his expression unreadable. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he gave a slow, approving nod. Good, he said simply. The assistant stepped forward and took the folder. The CEO leaned back in his chair. There was never any real doubt, you know. I already knew what you would choose. The employee frowned slightly. Then why test me? The CEO smirked. Because power doesn't corrupt. It reveals. And I needed to see if you were ready for what comes next. The employee exhaled. He had passed the test. Not because he had outsmarted anyone. Not because he had played the game better than the rest. But because he had chosen honesty over fear. The CEO stood up, adjusting his sleeves. Congratulations. Your real career starts today. The employee felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just a job anymore. This was a responsibility. And as he walked out of that room, golden card still in his hand, he knew one thing for certain: loyalty wasn't about words. It was about actions. And in the end, that's what separates the weak from the strong.